Hello everyone. Welcome to the weekly focus for the Indian economy. For this particular week, I shall be discussing five important articles, one important term in news, as well as one scheme in news. The five articles that I shall be covering include RBI's measures to improve the liquidity, which has appeared in the context of the deficit in the banking system, liquidity. The next article is NITI Aayog's Fiscal Health Index. The third article is Unified Pension Scheme. Fourth one is with respect to decline in Forex reserves. And the fifth one is with respect to inclusion of Indian bonds in the Bloomberg Emerging Market Index. So let's start with the analysis of first article, that is RBI's measures to enhance liquidity in the banking system. See, in our previous weekly focus session, we had covered the topic of banking system liquidity. In that particular session, I had covered as to what do you mean by banking system liquidity? Why has the banking system liquidity declined to its lowest level in last 6 months? What steps has the RBI taken to improve the banking system liquidity? All of this we have covered in our previous session. Recently, it was reported in different media that RBI has come out with a slew of measures to improve the banking system liquidity. Through these measures, the RBI is going to inject almost 1.5 lakh crores into the banking system. Now, why is this particular article important for your prelims examination? As you can see, in the previous year prelims, repeatedly questions have been asked with respect to the liquidity in the economy. For example, questions have been asked as to what steps of the RBI could lead to increase or decrease in the liquidity in the economy, that is the money supply in the economy. So based upon the nature of questions asked in the previous year prelims, as far as this particular article is concerned, we will discuss three things, that is open market operations, variable rate repos, and Forex buy or sell swap. So like I said, RBI has taken a host of measures to improve the banking system liquidity. Number one, RBI is going to conduct open market operations for the first time in last 4 to 5 years. Second, RBI is going to inject money through a 56-day variable rate repo. And number three, RBI is going to carry out a Forex swap. So what are these tools? How do they impact the liquidity in the economy? That is what I'm going to cover one by one. And at the end of each and every tool, I will take up a practice question for prelims as well. So let's start with the first tool, that is open market operations. See, when you look at the definition of open market operations, market operations refer to outright purchase or sale of government securities by the RBI. So if RBI purchases or sells the government securities, we can call that as open market operations. In fact, the open market operations are also called as sterilization operations. Why does this become important? As you can see, in prelims 2023, we had a question as to which one of the following activities of RBI is considered to be part of sterilization. And the answer to this question was conducting open market operations. And as you can see, other type, the questions have been asked with respect to what steps does the RBI take and may lead to increase or decrease in the money supply, right? So let's understand what is meaning of open market operation. Like I said, in OMO, RBI may either purchase the government securities or sell the government securities. And by doing so, RBI makes permanent changes in the money supply in the economy. How so? Think here, RBI purchases the government securities from the banks. When it purchases government securities from the banks, it will inject money into the economy, right? So by injecting money into the economy, RBI would increase the money supply. Same way, if RBI sells the government securities to the banks, by selling the government securities to the bank, RBI will be able to suck out the money from the economy, right? So as you can see, during inflation, RBI would sell the government securities and suck out the money. By doing so, the money supply in the economy would reduce. Same way, during recession, RBI would purchase the government securities and inject the money, leading to increase in the money supply. So as per the latest plan unveiled by the RBI is going to purchase government securities worth 60,000 crores in 3 phases of rupees 2,000 crores each. So by purchasing government securities, RBI is going to inject the money. But this time it is different. Why it is different? Like I said, generally RBI purchases the government securities during recession or during slowdown. Considering the fact that Indian economy is not facing recession or slowdown right now, RBI is purchasing government securities this time to increase the banking system liquidity in the economy. So this is a very easy tool which is used by the RBI to control the total quantum of money supply in the economy. So having understood what exactly is OMO, let's take up a practice question for your prelims examination. Statement 1 says that purchase of government securities by the RBI as part of OMOs reduces the bond yields in India. So let's try to understand this through a flowchart, right? So here RBI is purchasing government securities. By purchasing government securities, what is happening is the demand for government securities would increase because RBI is purchasing more government securities, right? So as a demand for government securities increases, the bond prices would increase. So it's like saying if demand for a particular commodity increases, the prices of such a commodity will also increase. Extend the same logic here. Here, the demand for bonds issued by the government is increasing. So the bond prices would also increase. And if you know the basics of bond price and bond yield, you would be knowing that bond yield is inversely proportional to bond prices. Inversely proportional means if bond prices increase, bond yield would reduce. If bond prices reduce, bond yield would increase. In this situation, what is happening? Bond prices are increasing, right? So the bond prices increase, then we can say that the bond yields would reduce. So look at the first statement. Purchase of government securities by the RBI as part of OMOs will reduce the bond yields in India. Obviously, the statement 1 is correct. Let's have a look at statement 2. Purchase of government securities by the RBI leads to decrease in bond prices. Bond prices are not decreasing, bond prices are increasing. So the second statement in this particular case is incorrect. So the right answer would be C, which is statement 1 is correct, but statement 2 is incorrect. Let's move on to the next tool. The next tool is variable rate repos. So let's understand what is repo. Let's briefly touch upon the basics of repo. Then I will introduce you to the concept of variable rate repo. You all know that repo is basically a tool used by the RBI to inject money into the economy. Alternatively, you can also say repo is a tool through which banks borrow money from RBI. So if you see repo from the perspective of RBI, we can say that it's a tool through which RBI lends money to the banks. If you see it from the perspective of banks, repo is a tool through which banks borrow money from the RBI, right? So under repo, there are basically two legs of transaction. What are these two legs? Let's say this is RBI and this is bank. In the first leg of the transaction, the bank will sell government securities to the RBI. By selling government securities to the RBI, the bank would borrow money. Think of it. You have government security which is worth rupees 100. The face value of government security is rupees 100, right? So by selling government security worth rupees 100, bank will borrow rupees 100 in the first leg of the transaction. And let's say the first leg of the transaction takes place on the first day. Repo does have different duration, which means RBI may lend money to the banks for 1 day, for 7 days, for 14 days, for 28 days, or for 56 days. So depending upon the duration of repo, the second leg of the transaction will come into being. The second leg of the transaction will take place at the end of the duration of repo. For example, if it is a 14-day repo, the second leg of the transaction will take place on the 14th day. What actually happens on the 14th day? On the 14th day, you have RBI and the bank. Here on the 14th day, the bank will repurchase the government securities worth rupees 100. So it is repurchasing the government security worth rupees 100. But when it is repurchasing government security worth rupees 100, it will not repurchase it at rupees 100. Rather, it may repurchase this government security at 104. So here, by repurchasing the government security worth rupees 100 at 104, the bank gives back rupees 100 which it had borrowed on the first day, plus it will pay a interest of rupees 4, right? So this 4 rupees interest it is paying on the loan that it has borrowed, which means in this particular case the repo rate is equal to 4%. Just as an example, the banks borrow money and then repay the borrowed money with the interest. So in a way you can say repo rate is the rate at which banks borrow money from the Reserve Bank of India, right? So this is what is the repo. This is, everyone must have studied it as part of your basic knowledge related to Indian economy. But we are not just discussing repo. We are discussing variable rate repos. So what are these variable rate repos? Let's try to understand that. Okay, like I said, when you see this variable rate repo, in this word, the repo means it's a loan given by the RBI to the banks. And loan can have different duration, right? And it can be given at a different rate of interest. So do not confuse repo in this particular case with repo rate. Repo rate is a rate of interest. Repo is simply the loan which RBI is giving to the banks. So the loan could be given for different duration, or loan could be given at different rate of interest. So depending upon the duration of loan and the rate of interest, what we have is variable rate repos. For example, right now we have repos of different durations like 1 day, 7 day, 14 day, 28 day and 56 day. So as per the latest plan, RBI is going to conduct 56-day variable rate repo auction worth rupees 50,000 crores. So what is this variable rate repo then? Here, as far as duration is concerned, like I said, it could be 1 day, 7 day, 14 day, 28 day and 56 day. But as far as the rate of interest at which RBI gives loans, this rate of interest is actually decided through auction. What kind of auction? Imagine I'm a bank and you all are banks. So I will come up with a notification saying that I am going to issue you loan for 56 days using the variable rate repo. This is a notification which I would issue. In this notification, the RBI, that is me, would not mention the rate of interest at which I would give you loans. Instead, I will ask you to place your bids in terms of rate of interest. It means if you are a bank, you are required to place a bid as to at what particular rate of interest would you want to borrow money from me. How much interest you are willing to pay me to take this loan for 56 days. If RBI is not mentioning any rate of interest, then obviously you know what will happen. All the banks will start asking RBI to give loans at 0% rate of interest, right? So to avoid such a situation from taking place, what RBI says in its notification is, when you are placing your bids for the rate of interest, the bid rate cannot be equal to or less than the repo rate. So what is the present repo rate? Repo rate is 6.5%. So no bank in India can ask for loans from the RBI either at 6.5 or below 6.5% rate of interest. So different banks will place their bids at more than the existing repo rate. So think of it, all the banks will be required to place their bid in terms of rate of interest on a platform called as eCuber platform. Bid rate cannot be equal to or less than the repo rate. So let's say there are three banks. Bank X is asking to RBI, you lend me this 100 crore for say 14 days, for which I will pay you a interest of 6.6%. Bank Y asks RBI for the loans and it is willing to pay 6.7% rate of interest. Bank Z is willing to pay 6.75% rate of interest. Now considering, for example, let's say if I'm a bank, which bank is offering me a highest rate of interest? Bank X, Y, Z. Out of these three banks, Bank Z is offering me the highest rate of interest. So repo, which in this case is a loan would be offered to the highest bidder, that is Bank Z. So can you see here, RBI does not lend loans to the banks at or below the repo rate. And that is one of the reason why repo rate is also called as a benchmark policy rate. So RBI is going to conduct a variable rate repo of 56 days and then going to inject money into the economy. Based upon this understanding, let's have a look at the next practice question. Under variable rate repos, RBI gives short-term loans 1, 7, 40, 14, 28, 56. Generally, they are short-term loans to the banks at prevailing repo rate. Does the RBI give loans at prevailing repo rate? Absolutely not. RBI gives loans to the banks at more than the repo rate, right? So the first statement is incorrect. The variable rate repos are used to manage short-term liquidity in the economy, which is obviously correct. So statement 1 is incorrect, but statement 2 is correct. Let's move to the next tool. The next tool is what is called as Forex, buy or sell swap. What is this Forex buy or sell swap? As a name suggests, buy or sell swap, it is almost similar to your repo, because in repo you have two legs of transaction. In Forex buy or sell swap, there are two legs of transaction, almost similar to repo. But what is happening here is, on the first day, the Reserve Bank of India would buy dollars from the banks. By buying dollars from the banks, RBI will give them rupees, right? So first day RBI buys dollars, give them rupees, and thus the liquidity in the system, the banking system liquidity will increase. Just like how repo has different duration, which we discussed, 1 day, 7 day, 14 day, 28 day. Similar to that, the swap can be for different duration. Right now, RBI has decided to come up with a swap of a duration of 6 months. So in the second leg of the transaction, which will take place after 6 months, what will RBI do? RBI will sell the dollar which it had bought before. It will sell the dollar and it will take out the rupee. So it's like saying, firstly, RBI will buy dollar and put rupees into the economy for certain time duration. In this case, it is for, as you can see, 6 months. After 6 months, RBI will sell the dollar, and by selling the dollar, RBI will suck out whatever money it had injected. So what has happened for these 6 months? For these 6 months, RBI has injected money into the economy, right? That is the rupee liquidity into the economy. So if the rupee liquidity increases, obviously it is going to address the problem of the banking system liquidity deficit, right? Now, some of you might think in this particular case also, you might think that RBI is purchasing dollars from the banks. If it purchases the dollars from the banks, the dollar supply in the economy would reduce. If the dollar supply reduces, dollar value would increase. And if the dollar value increases, rupee value would reduce. That is, will it not lead to rupee depreciation? Obviously. Obviously, it will lead to rupee depreciation. But as of now, RBI is more concerned with respect to the deficit in the banking system liquidity rather than controlling the rupee depreciation. I'm very sure most of you have been reading newspaper. In the newspapers, it has been repeatedly highlighted that now RBI is not keeping a very tight leash on controlling the value of rupee. It has allowed the value of rupee to depreciate based upon the market forces. So right now, RBI is more concerned about banking system liquidity rather than the fall in the value of rupee. That is why RBI is going for the Forex buy or sell swap. So let's take up the practice question now. Which among the following measures are not likely to be taken to check the rupee depreciation? It's actually an easy question. but it has been converted into difficult question by adding the word not. So to simplify this question, simply take out the word not, solve this as a simple question, a direct question, but what you should do is instead of finding out the correct options, you need to find out the incorrect options. So let's see this. Curb the import of essential items. If you curb the import of essential items, dollar outflow from the economy would reduce. If dollar outflow reduces, then obviously we'll be able to control the rupee depreciation, right? Because dollar outflow reduces, dollar supply increases, and as the dollar supply increases, its value would reduce and rupee value would increase. That is, we can control the rupee depreciation. Encourage the foreign inflows. So in this particular case, dollar inflows into the economy increases, which means dollar supply increases, and hence dollar value would reduce and the rupee value would increase. So we can curb the import of non-essential items and we can encourage the foreign inflows. But what about Forex buy or sell swap? Like I said, if RBI purchases the dollars, dollar supply would reduce, dollar value would increase, and rupee value would depreciate, right? So RBI may not undertake this particular step to control the rupee depreciation. So because you are required to find out the incorrect option, because there's a word not in the question, the right answer in this particular case is only one. So having understood different measures undertaken by the RBI to inject liquidity into the economy, let's move to the next article. Now coming to the next article is related to NITI Aayog's Fiscal Health Index. Let me just give you a brief background as far as this particular article is concerned. The states in India account for almost 2/3 of the total public sector expenditure. So when the government spends money on creation of infrastructure, or for that matter social services like education, health, drinking water, sanitation, and so on, the state governments alone account for 2/3 of that public expenditure. So obviously, the finances of the state government should be healthy. If their financial position deteriorate, then they will not be able to make investment either in creation of infrastructure or for providing the welfare services. And this can hamper India from becoming Viksit Bharat by the end of 2047. In recent few years, you must have observed that most of the state governments have been announcing a lot of freebies. Freebies such as free electricity, free water, free laptops, farm loan waivers, free bus travel, and so on. Because of announcement of freebies, the debt burden of some of the states has drastically increased, so much so that they have been cutting down on their capital expenditure. For example, in case of Punjab, the debt to GSDP ratio of Punjab has increased to almost 45%. In West Bengal, it has increased to almost 41%. So if the debt increases, their interest burden increases, and they will have less amount of money to spend on welfare or creation of assets. For example, last year, the Deputy Chief Minister of Karnataka had highlighted that because of announcement of freebies by the Karnataka government, the government is not left with enough amount of money for the purpose of development. So in order to promote inclusive growth and to become developed economy, the finances of the states become quite important. So far, most of the time, we have been focusing on finances of the central government. The finances of state government has so far been neglected. So this is the time where we should start focusing on the finances of the state government. In fact, this was a concern raised by RBI in its report on the finances of the states. So in order to measure the financial health of the states, the NITI Aayog has come up with an index which is called as Fiscal Health Index 2025. Why is this article important on the prelims and mains? As you can see, in the previous year prelims, questions have been asked with respect to fiscal federalism. Fiscal federalism means transfer of finances from center to the states, right? So questions have been asked with respect to finance commission, which is one aspect of fiscal federalism. So as far as your prelims examination is concerned, in the prelims examination, we may get questions related to trends in state finances. You can see these kind of questions you may get. And as far as the mains examination is concerned, in mains syllabus, there is a line government budgeting. And so far, UPSC has been asking questions related to the central government finances. But now, since state government finances are in news, UPSC might ask you questions related to state government finances. So, as far as the mains examination is concerned, you should know the problems in the state's finances, the reforms undertaken by few states, and what more needs to be done. Based upon this question, you have this particular mains question for practice. The question reads, monitoring fiscal health of the states is essential for ensuring financial stability, sustainable growth, and effective governance. Discuss various concerns with respect to finances of the states. Also highlight the strategies needed to address these problems. So what I will do in the initial part of my discussion, I will confine myself to the NITI Aayog's Fiscal Health Index. That is, how is this particular index measured? What factors are taken into consideration? What are the best performing and the worst performing states? After discussing these basic things, I will take you through the different aspects of state finances. So let's start with the discussion of this particular fiscal health index. See, NITI Aayog in this particular report has analyzed the fiscal health of 18 states and UTs which have state legislature. So based upon the fiscal health of these 18 states and UTs with state legislature, it has compiled a report. But to analyze the fiscal health of these states and UTs with state legislature, the NITI Aayog has taken into account 5 parameters. What are these parameters? Number 1, quality of expenditure. Where are the states spending money? What is their quality of expenditure? See, when you see the expenditure by the states, they can be categorized into development expenditure and non-development expenditure. So all of you know the union finances, right? Generally, we have revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. Obviously, the same thing is applicable to the states also. But in addition to that, they have what is called as development expenditure and non-development expenditure. What is development expenditure? You can say development expenditure is any money spent by the states for the purpose of development. And what can be that? It can be both capital expenditure as well as revenue expenditure. Obviously, within capital expenditure, it is the money spent on creation of assets like roads, railways, and other infrastructure projects. Within revenue expenditure, it includes the money spent on social services. What are these social services? Think of education, health, sanitation, skill building. All of these social services are also accounted as part of capital expenditure. Same way, welfare of poor and vulnerable sections, even that is included as part of the development expenditure. So generally, if you see social services and welfare related thing, we include it in RE, revenue expenditure, right? So please know, development expenditure includes the money spent on both RE and CE, provided that particular money is spent for the purpose of development, which is going to help the states in the long run, which includes creation of assets, money spent on social services, money spent on welfare of poor people. The rest of the expenditure, you could say, like interest payments, salaries and pensions of the government officials, or administrative expenses, that is money spent for collection of taxes and other things. You could include this as non-development expenditure. In fact, this non-development expenditure is also referred to as committed expenditure. This is something which the state governments should compulsorily spend because it has committed itself to it. Think of interest payment, it's a commitment of the states, right? Think of salaries and pensions or administrative expenses. These are committed expenditure. So committed expenditure is same as non-development expenditure. So obviously, if a particular state is spending more money on development expenditure, it means its quality of expenditure is good, right? So see, total development expenditure divided by total expenditure. Second one, total capital outlay divided by gross state domestic product. That is, what is its percentage of GSDP which is spent on CE. What's the difference? Development expenditure includes both RE and CE on development. Here it is only CE, capital expenditure. Revenue mobilization. In case of states revenue comes from different sources. For example, states have their own revenue, and this own revenue is in the form of tax revenue and non-tax revenue. What are the taxes which the state governments can impose? State governments get taxes in the form of state GST. They get taxes in the form of excise duty on alcohol. They get taxes in the form of sales tax on petroleum products. They get tax imposed on motor vehicles. They get tax in the form of stamp duty on registration of property. So these are some of the taxes which the state government will impose and collect. Non-tax revenue is probably like interest receipts of the state. If state government gives loans to the local bodies, on such loans the state will get interest, or it might include profit or dividend of the states. Apart from own revenue, states also get money from the center. So from the center, it gets money in the form of states share of taxes. And second, it also gets money in the form of grants in aid. And both these two things are transferred to the states based upon the recommendations of Finance Commission. Apart from that, the states also borrow money as well. So these are the different sources from where the state governments do get money. So how do you know whether a state is financially healthy or not? To that, we have to see how much revenue the state is going to get from its own revenue, right? That is the tax revenue and the non-tax revenue. So that's what we see. State's own revenue as percentage of GSDP. State's own revenue divided by total expenditure, which says what percentage of its expenditure the state is able to meet from its own revenue. If a state is able to meet most of its expenditure from its own revenue, it means it is financially healthy. It is less dependent upon the state, the center's transfers, right? Fiscal prudence, look at gross fiscal deficit of a state as percentage of GSDP as well as revenue deficit. Debt index looks at interest payments divided by revenue receipts. So when it is getting revenue receipts, right? So what percentage of that revenue receipts it is using to make interest payment? If the interest payment as part of revenue receipts is higher, it means such a state's debt burden is also higher. If interest payments as percentage of revenue receipts is lower, it means the state has less debt, right? So it tells us what percentage of your receipts you are using to service your interest. Outstanding liabilities as percentage of GSDP, which is the overall liabilities. Last one is debt sustainability. Debt sustainability means whether the state will be able to repay the loans that it has taken in the past or not. And how do you look at, or how do you know whether the state's debt is sustainable or not? According to NITI Aayog, it will compare the growth rate of GDP of a state, and it will compare that particular growth rate with the growth rate of interest payment. For example, if every year if state's GDP is increasing by 5% and interest payments are increasing by say 2%, what does this mean? Growth rate is higher than the interest payment. So obviously such a state will be able to repay the debt. On the contrary, if the GDP growth rate is 5% of a state and the interest payments have increased to 10%, interest payments are increasing by far higher margin as compared to growth rate. So such a state for sure is going to default on repayment of. So these are the factors which are taken into consideration by NITI Aayog to measure the financial performance. Why are these things important? You could get this question directly in UPSC prelims, or in mains if you get a question on what are the problems and challenges with respect to finances of states. You could actually highlight the problems by taking into account these factors, like percentage of money spent on development expenditure is less, debt has increased, interest payments as part of revenue receipts has increased. So that is how you could write a very good answer by keeping in mind these parameters, right? So let's see what are the best and worst performing states according to NITI Aayog. Not really important, but you can just see here the top 3 states in terms of fiscal health are Odisha, followed by Chhattisgarh, followed by Goa. And the worst performing states in terms of fiscal health include Punjab, followed by Andhra Pradesh, followed by West Bengal. These are the worst performing states. Other things are not really important. If you just remember the top 3 best performing and top 3 worst performing, that alone is more than sufficient. Now let's have a quick look at the finances of the states, which becomes important for your prelims examination. This is the snapshot of the receipts of the states. And like I told you before, states gets money in the form of their own revenue. They get money in the form of transfer from the central government, or they could borrow money as well. As you can see, out of these three sources, which one accounts for the highest share? The state's owned revenue. It is almost on an average 23 lakh crore. Central transfer is somewhere around 18.4 lakh crore. Just remember that state's own tax revenue is more than the central transfers. But in terms of own tax revenue, from where are the states getting maximum amount of money? Please have a look at this pie chart. The different taxes which the states impose and collect include stamp duty, taxes and duties on electricity, state GST, sales tax on basically petroleum products, state excise duty on alcohol, and taxes on vehicles, that is road tax. And can you see, out of all the taxes, the majority of the money the states are getting from state GST. This is one. State GST is followed by sales tax on petroleum products. And this is followed by state excise duty on alcohol. If you remember top three, that is sufficient. Let's look at the expenditure pattern of the state government. Like I said, when it comes to expenditure pattern, just like central government, you have revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. But apart from revenue and capital, states have other way of classifying the expenditure, that is development expenditure and non-development expenditure. So please remember what is included in development expenditure and what is included in committed expenditure. For example, development expenditure will include both capital expenditure and revenue expenditure on development of infrastructure, on social services, as well as welfare scheme. So it is strictly not limited to only capital expenditure. It includes both capital and revenue. Committed expenditure includes interest payment, salaries and pensions, and administrative expense. Next is fiscal deficit of the states. So what has happened to the gross fiscal deficit of the states? As you can see, in the year 2003, the gross fiscal deficit of the states was somewhere around 4.1%. From 4.1%, the gross fiscal deficit of the states has now got reduced to 2.9. And one of the reason for this decline in the gross fiscal deficit of the states is because of adoption of FRBM Act by the respective state government. So just like how central government has adopted the FRBM Act, similarly states have also adopted FRBM Act, which has led to improvement in their fiscal health. As far as the debt of the states is concerned, can you see prior to COVID, the overall debt to GDP ratio of the states was 26.6. So then COVID happened, and obviously because of COVID, the states had to borrow more amount of money. So increase in borrowing by the states led to increase in the debt to GDP ratio. But post COVID, good thing is that the debt has actually got reduced from 31 to 28.8. So there are two good things about the finances of the states. Number one, the gross fiscal deficit of the states on an average has got reduced, and even the debt of the states post COVID has also got reduced. Then why are we so much concerned with respect to finances of the states? The problem here is we are just looking at averages, which means there's huge disparity between the states in terms of financial health. For example, on one side, you have Delhi, which which has extremely low outstanding liabilities. On the other side, you have Punjab, whose debt has increased to 45%. Similarly, you can see the spikes in terms of debt of West Bengal, Arunachal Pradesh, and so on. So overall, the finances of the states look healthy. But if you have a individual look at the finances of the states, that is where the real problem lies. So having understood the basics, let's now get into the main discussion and identify what are the problems and challenges with respect to finances of the states, what reforms have been undertaken, and what more needs to be done. So we have covered the importance, we have covered the sources of revenue, we have covered achievements. We are going to focus on problems and challenges. What are the problems and challenges? Problem number one. See, because of introduction of GST, most of the taxes which are earlier imposed by the states, they have now got subsumed under GST. Because of which the states have lost their autonomy with respect to raising taxes. Now the states have very limited avenues, limited opportunities to raise taxes. For example, as of now, they could probably impose tax on alcohol for human consumption, on petroleum products. So there are very few commodities on which they could impose the taxes. Second point, lack of revenue neutrality in GST. Prior to introduction of GST, that is before 2017, if you see the average indirect tax rate in India, on an average, when people used to purchase goods, services, on an average, people used to pay a tax rate of around 15.5%. After the introduction of GST, now we have four standard GST rates, right? The four standard GST rates are 5, 12, 18 and 28%. Now, most of the products under GST are in this particular tax slab of 12%, which means the average GST rate is somewhere around 11.6 to 11.7. So it means the average tax rate earlier was 15.5, but now the average tax rate is 11.6, which is good for the people because people are paying less in terms of indirect taxes. But bad for whom? Bad for the states, because states are losing out on revenue. So can you see here what I mentioned? Lack of revenue neutrality, which means how much ever taxes they used to earn before, the same amount of tax they are not able to earn after the introduction of. States are now being more dependent upon the center for the transfers through the recommendations of the Finance Commission. State governments, because of vote bank politics, they have been announcing a lot of freebies, which has led to increase in the interest burden, increase in the overall debt, and hence poor financial position. So the NITI Aayog's report, in fact, also mentions that some of the states have cut down on their development expenditure because of the fact that they are spending more amount of money on freebies. Higher debt burden, which we discussed in case of Punjab, it is 45 to 46%, West Bengal 41%. Committed expenditure has increased. Like I told you, salaries and pensions is a kind of committed expenditure. Some of the states have reverted back from new pension scheme to old pension scheme. In old pension scheme, even the government is required to make only the government is required to make contribution to the pension. There's no contribution by employees. So old pension scheme imposes higher burden on the government. So the next topic is old pension scheme, will be covering that. So some of the states such as Rajasthan, Himachal Pradesh, Punjab, they are shifted towards old pension scheme, Because of that, their committed expenditure has increased. States have been resorting to off-budget borrowings. So states are indirectly borrowing money through state government owned PSUs. So instead of directly borrowing money, the state government is indirectly borrowing money through state PSUs. So imagine if state PSUs borrow money, it is the borrowing by state PSU. It is not the borrowing by the states. So whatever the state PSUs are borrowing money, right, that is not accounted in fiscal deficit. So states are increasingly resorted to off-budget borrowings, which is in turn increasing their future liabilities. So what are the reforms introduced? Like I said, the fiscal deficit of the states has got reduced thanks to FRBM Act introduced by the states. Second, we have abolished the planning commission, which earlier used to allocate finances to the states. Now all the finances which the states would get, they are getting it from the finance commission only. So what used to happen before, that is prior to 14th finance commission, you have state used to get money from planning commission. States also used to get money from finance commission. When planning commission used to transfer money to the states, we used to call that grant as tied grant. Why are we calling it as tied grant? Because when planning commission used to transfer money to the states, planning commission used to impose condition on the states as to for what purpose the money should be utilized. For example, if planning commission is transferring some amount of money to a particular state, planning commission would say compulsorily you have to use this much money for education, this much money for health, this much money for creation of infrastructure. It was tied. And the problem was that it led to loss of financial autonomy of the states, because how a particular state should spend money is not determined by the state government, rather it is determined by the planning commission. It was leading to loss of financial autonomy. Finance commission also used to transfer money which is in the form of untied grant. Untied in this means no conditions. It is completely up to the state for what purpose they would want to utilize the money for. So if I am a state, I would probably want more amount of money in the form of untied grant, because it will give me more autonomy, right? So what has happened is we have abolished the planning commission. And when we abolish planning commission, whatever money that used to come from planning commission, that money is now coming from finance commission after 14th finance commission. That is why, what had happened in case of 14th finance commission, the state's share of taxes increased from 32% to 42%. Why the sudden jump of 10%? The sudden jump of 10% was because whatever money was earlier coming through planning commission, now it started coming through finance commission, and thus the state share of taxes increased, which is good for the states. So it has strengthened the cooperative federalism. Introduction of GST has simplified the indirect tax regime. Some state governments have introduced DBT, direct benefits transfer, which has led to increase in financial savings of the states. Case in point is Raitu Bandhu in Telangana, Raitu Bharosa in Andhra Pradesh, Kalia scheme in Odisha provides for direct benefits transfer to the farmers. So just like how you have PM Kisan, these states have their own state specific schemes. So this has improved transparency, accountability, and better public expenditure management. Lastly, some of the state government have brought about reforms in the discoms, and this has led to improvement in their financial position. The RBI's report on state finances has given some recommendations which should be implemented to improve the finances of the states. What are these recommendations? Number one, RBI says that we have to amend the State FRBM Act. By amending the State FRBM Act, the off budget borrowings of the states should also be included in the definition of the debt. So if state government is not borrowing money directly, but if state government is borrowing money indirectly through a state PSU, even though that particular borrowing is not of the state, but that particular borrowing is of the state owned entity, even then that particular borrowing should be included in the debt under the FRBM Act. Second, to ensure that the state governments are able to meet the target set under the State FRBM Act, we need to have a monitoring mechanism, and that monitoring mechanism can be in the form of Fiscal Council. So Fiscal Council should monitor the compliance of the states with the FRBM targets. States should undertake rationalization of subsidies to cut down on their revenue expenditure. We must implement outcome budgeting in order to improve the finances of the states. Outcome budgeting means when the state government is allocating money, that particular money should be linked to the outcomes. That is what benefits it would have on the society as a whole. For example, if you are allocating money for education department, the outcome in this particular case is it should lead to improvement in learning outcomes. If you are allocating money to the Ministry of Health, the outcome in this particular case should be it should lead to increase in life expectancy. So we are ensuring the accountability of the ministry in terms of its ability to meet the goals. That is what is outcome budgeting. And we should provide for more transparency and accountability. For that, all the state governments should be encouraged to highlight their fiscal parameters on a regular basis. So all the state governments should be encouraged to highlight as to what is their fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, what is their debt on a regular basis. So these are some of the strategies which are needed. So let's take up the practice question. Practice question number 4. Which among the taxes are imposed by the state governments in India? Sales tax on petroleum products, tax on motor vehicles, taxes and duties on electricity, as well as stamp duty. Answer is 1, 2, 3 and 4. With respect to finances of the states in India, consider the following statements. States own tax revenues lower than central transfers? No. We discuss states own tax revenues more than the central transfers. Excise duty on alcohol accounts for the highest share of own tax revenue of states. It is not excise duty on alcohol, it is state ST. Combined debt of states has drastically increased in the last 5 years. Fortunately, this has not happened. The debt of the states has actually reduced post COVID. Here you are required to identify incorrect statements. So right answer is 1, 2 and 3. Which among the following are included in the committed expenditure of the states in India? Committed expenditure, something which the states has committed to and compulsorily they have to spend this particular money. It includes salaries and pensions as well as interest payments. So answer in this particular case is 1 and 2 only. Now let's move to the next topic. The next topic is unified pension. I had actually covered this particular topic in my budget discussion, but for the benefit of all, I'm going to cover this particular topic once again. If someone has already seen this particular topic, you can simply skip to the next topic. So what is this unified pension? In August 2024, the Union Cabinet approved the unified pension scheme for the government employees. So it was announced in August 2024. And on Jan 25th, 2025, the central government has finally notified the unified pension scheme for the government employees. Why is this topic important? As you can see, in prelims 2017, there was this question about national pension system. Similar to national pension system, you could get a question related to unified pension scheme. So what we are going to do is we are going to have a comparison between unified pension scheme and the new pension scheme. What is the difference between the two? But to first understand what is the new pension scheme, I'll also quickly discuss about OPS, Old Pension Scheme. Old pension scheme was actually introduced in the year 2004. So what is this old pension scheme? Let's have a quick look at that particular scheme. See, in case of old pension scheme, it's basically a pension scheme for the government employees, people serving in the government. Under the old pension scheme, the government of India used to make contribution to the corpus for the pension. The government employees never used to make any kind of contribution to the corpus. So whatever contribution is made to the pension corpus, based upon that, the employees, they used to get 50% of their loss drawn salary as pension. Let's say upon the age of retirement, someone used to earn a salary of 1 lakh. So he used to get 50% of 1 lakh, that is 50,000 as pension after his retirement. And who used to contribute for that particular pension corpus? Only the government. No contribution at all by the employee. So this we call it as defined benefit. Why are we saying defined benefit? Because government employees were assured that for sure they'll get 50% of their lost drawn salary as pension. When you see the old pension scheme, it was very good from the perspective of employees. Reason number one being they used to get minimum assured pension. Upon the death of the employee, the family pension was assured. How much pension a person would get, that is linked to inflation. So it is linked to CPI, Consumer Price Index, IW, industrial workers. So as the rate of inflation used to increase, the pension amount also used to increase. And there was no need to contribute by the employee. Extremely good from the perspective of government employees. But bad for who? Bad for the government, because the government's pension burden was increasing. So to reduce this pension burden on the government, we introduced the new pension scheme. What happens in new pension scheme is you have contribution from the government also and contribution by the employee also. Earlier employee was not making contribution, now employee is making contribution. Government used to contribute 14% of the salary, employee used to contribute 10% of the salary. Whatever was a monthly contribution, right? That monthly contribution used to be invested in pension funds. You know mutual funds, right? Mutual funds invest money in the capital market. Same way, pension funds, they invest money in capital market like shares, bonds, government securities, and so on. So this corpus was invested in pension funds, and how much pension one would get, that was based upon the market rate of returns. In OPS, one was sure as to how much pension you would get. You would get 50% of your last drawn salary as pension. Under NPS, you're not very sure how much pension you would get upon the age of retirement. If the market is doing extremely good, probably will get more pension. In fact, more than what you would get under old pension scheme. But if market is not doing that great, you may actually end up getting less pension. So Upon the age of retirement, you'll get 60% of the lump sum amount and remaining 40% will be paid over a period. That is what was new pension scheme. New pension scheme was called as defined contribution because under NPS, the benefit is not defined. What is defined is your contribution is defined. But what is problem with NPS? The problem with NPS is it was believed that it went against the interest of government employees. If OPS was tilted more towards government employees, NPS was more tilted towards the government because it reduced the burden on the government, right? So let's see what is this unified pension scheme. Let me tell you, unified pension scheme is going to be implemented from 1st of April 2025. At the same time, you must understand that unified pension scheme is not going to replace the new pension. Government employees who are already subscribed under NPS, they have a choice to move towards unified pension scheme. Apart from that, new government employees after 1st of April 2025, they would have a choice to either enroll themselves under new pension scheme or unified pensions. So government is going to implement both NPS and UPS. It is up to us whether you want to get enrolled under NPS or unified pension. Under unified pension scheme, just like your NPS, it's a defined contribution. Government will contribute 18.5% salary of the government employees and employees will contribute 10% of their salary. And it is also defined benefit. Can you see what we have done? The best feature of old pension scheme was defined benefit, right? So this feature we have incorporated in the unified pension scheme. What is this defined benefit now? It says that one is now going to get minimum assured pension. How much is that? Rupees 10,000 per month after you complete 10 years of government service. So as soon as you complete minimum 10 years of government service, you become eligible to get pension amount. And the minimum pension that you would get is rupees 10,000. And as your service period increases, the amount of pension that you would get would also increase. To what extent it will increase? It is going to increase up to 50% of your salary. It says 50% of lost drawn salary for employees with an experience of 25 years or more. So from 10 years to 25, your pension amount will keep on increasing from 10,000 to, let's say, keep on increasing, and maximum it will reach is up to 50% of last drawn salary. People are also entitled for family pension at 60% of pension received. So how much ever pension one used to get, upon the death of such a government employee, 60% of that pension will be paid to the spouse of that particular government employee. Pension that one would get is linked to inflation, that is CPI, IW. Some important pointers that you should know is, number one, like I told you, UPS is not going to completely replace NPS. Both are going to be implemented simultaneously, but now people would have a choice. If people are serving in government for less than 10 years, they will not get any pension. And if people are removed or dismissed from the service, or if people resign from government service, in that case, people will not get any kind of pension. So these are some of the things that you should know from the perspective of the prelims examination. You can just look at this particular table, which includes the difference between old pension scheme, new pension scheme or national pension scheme, and unified pension. Let's look at this particular question on unified pension scheme. The unified pension scheme would replace the new pension scheme. It is not going to replace. The unified pension scheme provides for minimum guaranteed pension of 50% of loss drawn salary for all the government employees. No, 50% of loss drawn salary as a pension will be given to only those government employees who complete minimum tenure of 25 years. The unified pension scheme provides for contribution by both government and employees. It is correct. Answer is 3 only. As far as practice MCQ number 8 is concerned, please have a look at this particular MCQ. Try to solve this MCQ and let me know the answer in the comment section given below. Now coming to the next article. The next article is related to Forex reserves. Somewhere in the month of September 2024, the Forex reserves in India had increased to more than $700 billion. But as you know, that in India we started facing rupee depreciation. So in order to control the rupee depreciation, the RBI started selling dollars from the Forex reserves. So as the RBI sells dollars from the Forex reserves, dollar supply in the economy would increase, dollar value would reduce, and the rupee value would increase. So RBI was so far selling dollars from the Forex reserves to control the rupee depreciation. Because of repeated selling of dollars from the Forex reserves, the Forex reserves in India have now touched an 11-month low. So Forex reserves is now somewhere around $620 billion. So from more than $700 billion, now the Forex reserves have dropped down to $620 billion. So why is this particular topic important? As you can see, in the previous year prelims, repeatedly questions have been asked with respect to various aspects of Forex reserves in India. So based upon the nature of questions asked in previous year prelims, we will understand different aspects of Forex reserves. That is, what do you mean by Forex reserves? The legal framework for the Forex reserves, the components of Forex reserves, the adequacy of Forex reserves, all these things we shall be discussing, and the end of which we shall take up some practice questions. So what do you mean by Forex reserves? According to RBI, Forex reserves are those assets which are readily available to the RBI. Those assets which are readily available to RBI for financing BOP. If there's a shortfall in BOP, to finance that shortfall, it will have some kind of reserves. And for second one, for intervening in the Forex market to check the exchange rate volatility. That is, RBI should maintain some amount of dollars, right? So that it can sell the dollars and control the large scale rupee depreciation. So the assets with the RBI for financing BOP or for controlling exchange rate volatility, we can consider that as Forex reserves. And as you can see, how does RBI build the Forex reserves? See, in certain years, it might so happen that we may have surplus BOP, right? Surplus BOP means the inflow of dollar in a particular year is more than the outflow of dollar. So if we have surplus BOP in a particular year where we have got more amount of dollars, RBI will use this particular dollar to build the Forex reserves. So it's almost similar to the buffer stock which is built by Food Corporation of India. Similar to how FCI builds buffer stock of food grains, RBI will build a buffer of adequate Forex reserves. Under the RBI Act 1934, RBI acts as custodian of Forex reserves. What are the components of Forex reserves? First one is foreign exchange assets. See, most of the students are under wrong impression that only foreign currencies are part of the Forex reserves. You must understand that apart from foreign currency, there are other things also which are part of Forex reserves, which include government securities issued by foreign government, the deposits that we may maintain with other central banks, the deposits that we may maintain with overseas branches of commercial banks. Even they are readily available to the RBI for financing BOP or for intervening in the Forex market, right? That is why even they are included in the Forex reserves. Second one is monetary gold. See, gold that we have in India can be broadly categorized into two: monetary gold and non-monetary gold. Monetary gold is that gold which is with the RBI as part of Forex reserves. If any gold is with the RBI as part of Forex reserves, that we call it as monetary gold. Everything else is called as non-monetary gold. SDR, which is a international reserve asset of IMF, and reserve position of IMF. So some part of our IMF quota we will keep it with ourselves as part of Forex reserves. So when that is part of the Forex reserves in India. Apart from that, you must be knowing about the issue department of RBI. The issue department of RBI also maintains Forex reserves. It means it maintains foreign currencies, right? It maintains this foreign currency in order to print the rupees. So whatever foreign currencies is there with the issue department, even that is part of Forex reserves. You can see the foreign currency assets and gold, which is with the issue department. It is also considered to be part of India's Forex reserves. So among all of these components, the largest share is of foreign exchange assets and the lowest share is reserve position in IMF. Countries which have the highest Forex reserves include China, followed by Japan, followed by Switzerland, and fourth is India. So as we can see, India has the world's fourth largest Forex reserves. And generally, central banks keep gold as part of their Forex reserves, right? So countries which have the highest gold reserves, obviously as part of Forex reserves, they are US, Germany, Italy, France, and Russia. Last one is, how do you know whether a country has adequate amount of Forex reserves or not? To measure adequacy of Forex reserves, we use number of parameters. First one is import cover. Import cover means with our Forex reserves, for how many months we can pay for our imports. That is what is import cover. So as of now, India's import cover is 8 to 9 months. So with our Forex reserves of $620 billion, we can continue to pay for imports for next 8 to 9 months. That is one way to measure adequacy of Forex reserves. Second one is called as Greenspan-Godoty rule. According to this particular rule, a country should have enough amount of Forex reserves to pay for its short-term external debt. External debt of a country can be categorized into short-term debt and the long-term debt. Long-term debt, as the name says, it's a debt or it's a loan that has to be repaid back after more than 1 year. Short-term external debt is a debt which the country is required to repay within 1 year. So country should have at least that much amount of Forex reserves, which is enough to meet its short-term external debt. Third one is ratio of reserves to broad money. So what is this ratio of reserves to broad money? Let's understand what do you mean by broad money. So there are different ways to measure the money supply in the economy. One is reserve money, which is M0. Second one is narrow money, which is M1. And the third one is broad money, which is also referred to as M3. And what is included in the broad money? That is M3. M3 includes the currency with the public. Second, it includes demand deposits with the banks. Third, it includes time deposits with the banks. And as you know, demand deposits with the banks include savings account and the current account. Time deposits with the banks include fixed deposit account as well as recurring deposit account. So these three components are considered to be part of broad money. So imagine a particular situation. If people in a particular country all at once, if they try to convert this broad money into foreign currency so that they can make investment in other countries simultaneously. Let's say every one of us is going to bank to withdraw our demand deposits and time deposits. Similarly, every one of us is using the currency, that is cash that we have, to convert into foreign currency. So if every one of us is trying to convert the broad money into foreign currencies so that we can invest in other countries, right? So don't you think if you are trying to convert this into foreign currencies all at once, we should have adequate forex reserves so that we are able to pay the people to convert their currency, demand deposits and time deposits into other foreign currency, right? So according to IMF, International Monetary Fund, it is said that the forex reserves of a particular country should be at least 20% of your broad money. If the total amount of broad money in our economy in terms of, let's say, dollars, just as a denomination, is around $100, the forex reserves that you should have is at least $20. In then we can say that a country has adequate amount of forex reserves. Imagine if forex reserves is below 20% of your broad money, then IMF says that it could lead to bank run. Bank run means people are trying to withdraw their money from deposits. In that particular case, the bank will not be able to fulfill the obligation towards the depositors. So ratio of the forex reserves to broad money is also a integral part of our adequacy of reserves. Next one is ratio of reserves to financial outflows. You know, a lot of foreign investment comes into India, right? The foreign investment usually comes in the form of the FPI, foreign portfolio investment. Suddenly, if FPI wants to withdraw their money from India, so to withdraw their money from India, what they will do is they'll convert their investment back into dollars and take out that money from India. So we should be able to meet our financial outflows. Last one is forex reserves to GDP ratio, which highlights the economic resilience of a particular country. So these are the different ways by which we measure whether a country has adequate forex reserves or not. In this particular context, you should remember IMF's assessing reserve adequacy framework. According to IMF's reserve adequacy framework, we can measure the adequacy of forex reserves through financial outflows, As I discussed, it is trying to look into what is the capital flight risk. If FPI is going out of India, and for that, if they need dollars, do we have sufficient amount of dollars? Broad money. If people wants to convert the deposits into dollars so that they can make investment into other countries, do we have sufficient amount of dollars in our forex reserves? That is banking risk. Short term debt. Do you have adequate amount of forex reserves to pay your short term external debt? Greenspan, Gudotti rule. Export income. To what extent your trade is linked to the dollar inflow and outflow? Suddenly, if imports increase, what will happen to our import cover? Import cover will reduce, right? Same way, what if our exports reduce? If our exports reduce, then we'll have less amount of dollars. Less amount of dollars means we will have less amount of dollars as part of our forex reserves. So that is how IMF measures the adequacy of forex reserves. Please remember the framework. Lastly, if you look at the overall trend in our forex reserves, you can see after India's independence in the year 1951-52, the total forex reserves in India was hardly around $1.8 billion. In 1991-92, that was the time when India faced the BOP crisis. Our forex reserves was hardly around $9 billion. So that is why we faced this BOP crisis. But after the LPG reforms in 1991, our forex reserves have drastically increased. Now they have reached almost $620 billion. This is as per the latest estimates. So this is the overall trend in terms of forex reserves. Let's now look at the practice questions. Practice MCQ number 9. Let's read this question. It's a analytical question. The first statement says US does not maintain forex reserves at all. Remember, I showed you the list of countries which have the highest forex reserves, right? China has the world's highest forex reserves, followed by Japan. US is not having the world's highest forex reserves. The reason why US does not need to maintain forex reserves in large quantity is because US currency dollar itself is a reserve currency for all other countries. Think of it. Why would a country like India need dollars as part of forex reserves? We need dollars to pay for our imports. We need dollars so that if foreign investors are wanting to withdraw their money from Indian capital market, we should have money, dollars to pay for them. But for US, this problem does not arise because dollar is the US currency itself, right? But does it mean that US does not maintain any forex reserves at all? US does maintain forex reserves. And the majority of its forex reserves are actually in terms of gold. So the first statement is very extreme statement. It says not at all needed. That is why the first statement is incorrect. The US dollar is considered to be the global reserve currency. It is correct. So the right answer is statement 1 is incorrect, but statement 2 is correct. Internationalization of rupee reduces the opportunity cost of maintaining forex reserves. What is this meaning of opportunity cost of maintaining forex reserves? Think of it. In India, let's say we have $100 billion. This is the amount of money. We can maintain this $100 billion in our forex reserves. And usually in forex reserves, we may keep it in the form of bonds issued by foreign government, right? And you must understand, if you maintain it in the bonds issued by foreign government, the bonds are issued by foreign government, right? So the risk of default of such bonds, because they are issued by sovereign entity, the risk of default is almost negligible. Financial market works upon a principle: higher the risk, higher the interest rate; lower the risk, lower the interest rate. So we as a country, when we are investing in bonds issued by foreign governments as part of our forex reserves, because of the lower risk, we are earning actually less interest on such bonds. On the other hand, let's say if we don't have to maintain forex reserves, in that particular case, we can invest in corporate bonds issued by big companies, big multinational companies. You must understand, risk of investing in corporate bonds as compared to risk of investing in government bonds is comparatively higher. Like I said, higher the risk, higher the interest rate. So think here, what is India doing? Our money, let's say $100 billion, we are investing in government bonds as part of our forex reserves. Don't you think we are losing out something? We are losing out on an opportunity. What is that opportunity that we are losing out? We are losing out an opportunity to earn higher returns if we probably invest in corporate bonds of companies, big companies. So this is our opportunity cost. This is the cost of the opportunity that we are losing out. If you go for internationalization of rupee, if rupee becomes international currency, can I say the need for India to maintain huge amount of forex reserves would reduce? Think of US. US currency dollar is a default currency at a global level, which you can use it for making payment of imports. If rupee becomes international currency, we can also make payment for trade in terms of rupee. So the need to hold dollars as part of forex reserves will reduce, and then more of our money we could invest in corporate bonds. So the what will happen to opportunity cost, the cost of opportunity that we are losing out, that cost of opportunity will reduce. So internationalization of rupee reduces the opportunity cost of maintaining forex reserves, correct? Internationalization of rupee reduces the need to maintain forex reserves. Need for India to maintain huge forex reserves. Both the statements are correct. So your answer should either be A or B in this case. When both the statements are correct, please add the word because after the first statement and read both the statement as one single statement. Does it make sense? Internationalization of rupee reduces the opportunity cost of maintaining forex reserves because internationalization of rupee reduces the need for India to maintain huge forex reserves. Yes, it is correct. So the right answer in this particular case is A. The next question: which among the following indicators are used to measure adequacy of forex reserves in a country? Import cover, ratio of forex reserves to short-term debt, ratio of forex reserves to FPI outflows, ratio of forex reserves to broad money. Answer is 1, 2, 3 and 4. Let's move to the next topic. See, last year Indian government securities were included in the JP Morgan Emerging Market Bond Index. That was last year. Similar to that, in March 2024, Bloomberg had announced that it will include the Indian bonds in its Emerging Market Bond Index. It was already included in JP Morgan. Now it has announced that it will be included in Bloomberg Bond Market Index. That announcement was made on March 5th, 2024. Now, it is being said from Jan 31st onwards, Indian bonds issued by the government will also get included in the Bloomberg Emerging Market Bond Index. So, as far as your prelims examination is concerned, you must understand what do you mean by including bonds in the global bond indices. What's the meaning of that? And how is it going to affect the Indian economy? Based upon that, we will take up this prelims question for practice. Now, to make you understand this concept, there is one concept that you should know. That concept is called as fully accessible route. See, in case of India, the Reserve Bank of India has imposed certain restrictions on FPI investment in government securities. It means RBI imposes a limit on how much should be the FPI investment in government securities on an annual basis. Let's say, just as an example, in 2025, the limit on FPI investment in government securities is 100 billion. It means FPIs cannot invest more than $100 billion in one single year in our government securities. The reason why RBI has imposed such a restriction is because we do not have full rupee convertibility on our capital account. Capital account means investment, right? So we do not have full rupee convertibility. Rather, we have partial rupee convertibility, where we can impose restrictions on capital transactions. But what we have now is a route called as fully accessible route, which was introduced by the RBI in the year 2020, basically to attract non-resident investors to invest in government securities. What happens under fully accessible route is that all the non-resident investors, including FPIs, can make investment in certain specified government securities without any limit. Which means whatever I explained before, that is not applicable to fully accessible route. RBI has come up with a list of government securities. In those government securities, the investment limit does not apply. Foreign investors can invest as much money they would want to, just like how we as domestic investors can invest as much money we want to in government securities. I hope this part is clear. The reason why this becomes important is Bloomberg has said that those government securities which have been specified by the RBI under fully accessible route, those government securities will get included in its global bond index. So what is this global bond index? See, in the global bond index, you have a list of bonds issued by different countries. So it acts like a reference point for the investors at a global level. It acts like a investment advice for the investors at the global level, saying that, look, you can invest in these bonds issued at a global level. So if a entity like JP Morgan or let's say Bloomberg is including Indian bonds in their bond indices, it means they are advising the foreign investors, saying that you can invest in these bonds. By investing in these bonds, there is lower risk. You get good returns. So obviously, when big entities like Bloomberg, JP Morgan advise global investors, we are going to get huge inflow into these government securities in India. what are its implications? How is it going to affect the economy? Let's understand that. Obviously, number one, there will be more dollar inflows. Second, the demand for government securities, which are part of fully accessible route, the demand will increase. As the demand increases, bond prices will increase. And as the bond prices increase, bond yield will reduce. That is second point. Third point, bond yield is directly linked to the borrowing cost of the government. If bond yield reduces, it means borrowing cost of the government will reduce. If bond yield increases, then the borrowing cost of the government will also increase. What is happening here? Bond yield is reducing, right? So as the bond yield reduces, the borrowing cost of the government will also reduce. Fourth point, even banks give out loans, right? Some categories of loans are called as floating rate loans. Floating rate loans means rate of interest on such loans is linked to the yield rates on government securities. So let's say the yield rate on government securities is 8%. The rate of interest on loans would also be 8%. These loans are called as floating rate loans because as the yield increases or decreases, the rate of interest on loans would also change accordingly. So when we include Indian bonds in the global bond indices, the bond yields reduces. If bond yield reduces, what will happen to rate of interest on loans? Rate of interest on loans will also reduce. So this can lead to increase in the investment. Our forex reserves will increase because more dollar inflows. It can help in internationalization of rupee because rupee would now become more prominent as a store of value because people are investing in Indian government securities which are denominated in rupees. It will reduce the dependence on the banks. So if the government wants to borrow money, government will be less dependent on banks to borrow money. Government will get more amount of money from the foreign investors. So these are the advantages, but there are some disadvantages, problem also. The biggest problem is, according to number of experts, our soaring external debt would increase. Soaring means government. So government ka external debt, what will happen to that external debt? It will increase because we are getting or we are borrowing more money from non-resident investors. That is one disadvantage. Second disadvantage is more dollar inflows can lead to rupee appreciation. More dollar inflows means dollar supply will increase, dollar value will reduce, rupee value will increase. And we could see more exchange rate volatility. Suddenly, huge amount of foreign investors are making an investment in government securities, rupee value will appreciate. Suddenly, if foreign investors are selling Indian bonds and going to make investment in US, the rupee value will depreciate. So we will see more of exchange rate volatility. That is a challenge. Based upon our understanding, let's look at this particular practice question number 12. How many among the following are the likely benefits of inclusion of Indian government securities in global bond indices? Benefits. Our soaring external debt, like I said, is not going to reduce. It's likely to increase. Decrease in exchange rate volatility? No, exchange rate will become more volatile. But what will happen to the bond yields? Bond yields are likely to reduce. So the answer in this particular case is only one. Having understood these articles, let's now move on to the term in news. And one of the term which was in news in the last week was most favored nation, MFN. So let me tell you why is this particular term MFN in news. See, you know that after Trump has become the president of US, Trump has repeatedly accused some countries such as China, India of being tariff kings. Tariff kings means Trump believes that India imposes higher customs duty when it is importing goods from US. So he believes that higher customs duty on import of goods from US is leading to decrease in exports from US to India. And if US is exporting less to India, then obviously the trade will be in favor of India, right? That will the trade balance will be in favor of India. So Trump, as such, has been advocating that we must reduce the customs fee. But it being said that we cannot reduce custom duty only on import of goods from US. If you reduce custom duty only on goods imported from US, and if you keep the custom duty same for import of goods from other countries, then it will be a violation of most favored nation clause of WTO. If we reduce the custom duty on import of goods from US, we would be forced to reduce the customs duty on import of same goods from other countries as well. That is what we are obligated to do so under most favored nation. So what is this most favored nation then? Let's understand. See, under most favored nation, let's say this is India, this is US, this is China, this is Japan. So under MFN, what actually happens is, as per WTO norms, every member country of WTO is MFN of each other, which means, looking at the example, for India, our most favored nation is US, China, as well as Japan. Similarly, for US, who is their most favored nation? India, China, and Japan. The same logic you can apply to China as well as Japan. So all the member countries are MFNs of each other. So when you see MFN, it's like saying that if you give benefit to one country, that is, let's say India gives benefit to one country, that benefit that you give to one country, that benefit will be applicable to all the member countries. That is what MFN says. For example, if we decide to reduce the custom duty from 4 to 3% for import of goods from US, we should import goods from China also at 3% and from Japan also at 3%. We cannot have custom duty based upon different countries. We should have same custom duty when we are importing a commodity from all the countries. That is what is most favored nation. So when you look at the word MFN, it might have a negative connotation, but actually the way it is implemented, it is a positive connotation, because MFN forces the member countries to treat everyone equally. It ensures that countries do not discriminate against the member countries. That is what is most favored nation. Based upon this understanding, let's look at the practice MCQ number 13. Which of the following scenarios would be a violation of most favored nation principle under WTO? What is a violation? Signing of FTA. If you sign free trade agreement, under free trade agreement, we will decide to import goods from another country at 0% custom duty. It is limited to that particular country alone, na? It is not applicable to other member countries. So, in a way, it is a kind of discrimination. But WTO itself allows the countries to sign this FTA, and WTO does not consider this as a violation of most favored nation. The reason being, WTO wants that the countries should be involved in as much as possible in free trade. Equal reduction in tariffs for all the member countries. Increase in custom duty of a particular product. Even this is not a violation of MFN. Imposing different tariff rates, that is custom duty on imports from different countries. This is a violation of MFN. Lastly, the last section is about schemes in news. And as you can see in Press Information Bureau for the last week, news was mentioned with respect to Pradhan Mantri Janjati Adivasi Nyaya Maha Abhiyan. This news appeared on Jan 30th, 2025. I have incorporated the previous year question and a practice question and the details about this particular scheme. Please go to this particular scheme and try to attempt the question. Thank you so much. I will meet you next week with the next set of articles. Thank you so much and keep reading until then.